It's February 18th, 2025,
Wow.
and we are diving into some pretty interesting articles from the Videntis today.
Yeah.
We've got Musk influences federal agencies amid growing controversy, Trump freezes funding, undermines global democracy efforts, and White House confirms Elon Musk lacks Doge authority.
Okay.
Seems like we're kind of exploring a tangled web of Elon Musk's influence
Right.
within the federal government.
Yeah.
What stands out to you just from reading these articles?
I mean, I think what's striking is that we have seemingly separate stories
Right.
about Elon Musk, government agencies, and foreign aid.
Yeah.
But they're all kind of deeply intertwined.
Yeah.
It's a story about power dynamics, blowing the lines between the tech sector and government.
Okay.
And then also the potential consequences of that domestically and globally.
So let's try to untangle this web then.
Okay.
Starting with Musk's role.
Yeah.
He's officially a senior advisor to President Trump.
Right.
But his companies SpaceX and Tesla, they're simultaneously receiving billions in government contracts, $3.8 billion to just last year,
Wow.
and a total of $13 billion over the past 5 years.
That's a lot.
Isn't that a potential conflict of interest?
It definitely raises some concerns.
Okay.
You have someone who benefits financially from government contracts, also advising the government
Right.
on policy,
Uh-huh.
creates a situation that's ripe for potential bias,
Right.
and makes you wonder if decisions are being made in the best interest of the public or for personal gain.
And then there's DOGE,
Right.
the Department of Government Efficiency,
Yeah.
which aims to streamline government operations.
Yeah.
But it's been a source of controversy,
Oh, yeah.
especially with Musk's proposal to, I don't know, drastically reduce
Right.
the number of federal agencies
Yeah.
and cuts and ending. Some people are calling it a radical overhaul.
Yeah. I mean, it's important to understand what DOGE is trying to achieve.
Okay.
But, like, it was created with this goal of making the government more efficient and cost-effective.
Okay.
And Musk's proposals, while bold, they are aimed at reducing bureaucracy and saving taxpayer dollars.
Right.
But at the same time, these proposals have also resulted in thousands of federal job losses,
Right.
which raises questions about the impact on those individuals and the communities they represent.
That's a really good point. It seems like efficiency can come at a cost.
It can.
And it's not just the job losses either.
Right.
There are concerns about transparency and accountability.
Yeah.
Democratic attorneys general are challenging Musk's influence.
Uh-huh.
And lawmakers are questioning whether his DOGE team even has the proper security clearances.
Okay.
For sensitive data, what are the implications of these legal challenges?
Well, I think these challenges highlight the importance of checks and balances in government.
Okay.
So, when someone like Musk, with his significant business interests,
Right.
gains influence within the government,
Uh-huh.
it's crucial to ensure that there are mechanisms in place
Right.
to prevent abuse of power
Okay.
and to guarantee that decisions are being made ethically and in the public interest.
And adding to that complexity, President Trump has removed 17 inspectors general,
Yeah,
who are essentially watchdogs
right.
meant to prevent government waste and fraud.
Yeah.
How does this impact the situation?
Well, removing these independent oversight mechanisms
Uh-huh.
raises serious concerns about accountability.
Okay.
Because inspectors general play a vital role
Yeah.
in ensuring that government agencies operate effectively and ethically,
Right.
and their absence creates a void that could potentially allow for unchecked misconduct or mismanagement.
So we've got Musk wielding considerable influence
Yeah.
within the government,
Right.
coupled with concerns about potential conflicts of interest,
Uh-huh.
and then a lack of independent oversight.
Yeah.
It seems like a recipe for, I don't know, trouble.
It's certainly a situation that warrants careful scrutiny.
Okay.
I think the lack of transparency and accountability, combined with the potential for conflicts of interest,
Right.
raises serious questions about the ethical implications of Musk's involvement
Okay.
in government affairs.
So we've been focusing on Musk's influence domestically.
Right.
But his impact might stretch even further.
Okay.
Another article details President Trump's decision to freeze $72 billion in U.S. foreign aid, impacting organizations like USAID.
Uh-huh.
Could there be a connection here?
Absolutely. This seemingly unrelated news item about foreign aid actually ties directly back
Okay.
into our discussion about power dynamics and global influence.
Okay.
USAID, which stands for the United States Agencies for International Development,
Yeah.
is a key player in providing humanitarian assistance and promoting development worldwide.
Right.
And the funding freeze could severely hamper its ability to carry out its mission. And it's not just about the money.
What do you mean?
Well, this funding freeze sends a clear message to the world, right? It signals a shift in U.S. priorities
Uh-huh.
and suggests a retreat from its traditional role as a champion
Okay.
for democracy and human rights.
So what happens when the U.S. steps back from that role?
It creates a void, a power vacuum,
Okay.
that other actors, including those with less than democratic agendas, are eager to fill.
You're talking about authoritarian regimes, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Authoritarian regimes thrive on instability and a lack of opposition.
Right.
When the U.S. reduces its support for democratic institutions and human rights,
Uh-huh.
it weakens the forces that counter those regimes.
And what about the impact on specific regions or countries?
Yeah.
Are there any that are particularly vulnerable?
The articles mention the potential impact on independent media outlets like Medusa,
Okay.
which operates in former Soviet countries.
Okay.
These outlets often rely on funding from organizations like the National Endowment for Democracy,
Right.
which is also facing cuts.
Okay.
Without that support, they may struggle to survive, leaving a gap in independent reporting
Right.
and making it easier for authoritarian governments
Uh-huh.
to control the narrative.
So we're potentially looking at like a domino effect.
Yeah,
Reduced U.S. support for democracy and human rights leads to a weaker civil society,
right.
which then creates opportunities for authoritarian regimes to consolidate power
Uh-huh.
and suppress dissent.
Precisely. It's a worrying trend.
Yeah.
And one that has far-reaching consequences.
It paints a pretty bleak picture.
It does.
Is there any hope of reversing this trend? What can be done to counter these negative forces?
Well, it's important to remember that the U.S. government is not a monolithic entity.
Right.
There are many individuals and organizations within the government and within civil society
Right.
who remain deeply committed to democracy and human rights.
So there's still a fight going on.
Absolutely. We're already seeing pushback from Congress, from the courts, and from the international community.
Okay.
There are lawmakers working to restore funding for foreign aid.
Right.
Legal challenges aimed at curbing Musk's unchecked influence.
Ah.
And global pressure on the U.S. to uphold its commitments to democratic values.
Okay.
The fight for democracy is rarely easy.
Yeah.
And it often involves setbacks.
Right.
But it's a fight worth having.
It sounds like we need to stay informed and engaged if we want to see positive change.
Absolutely. Awareness is the first step.
Okay.
Understanding the complexities of these issues, the potential consequences of inaction,
Uh-huh.
and the various actors involved is crucial.
Right.
And then, of course, comes action.
Okay.
Supporting organizations that champion democracy and human rights,
Uh-huh.
contacting your elected representatives,
Right.
and engaging in informed discussions are all ways to make a difference.
Okay, so circling back to Elon Musk,
Yeah,
how does his role fit into all of this?
right.
We've talked about his domestic influence,
Uh-huh.
but could his actions potentially have global implications as well?
That's an important question to consider.
Okay.
Musk's close relationship with President Trump, his influence within the administration,
Uh-huh.
and his focus on efficiency and disruption could all have unforeseen consequences on the global stage.
For example.
Well, imagine if Musk's emphasis on streamlining government operations
Okay.
leads to further cuts in foreign aid,
Uh-huh.
or if his focus on technological innovation overshadows investments in diplomacy and human rights.
Okay.
His actions, whether intentional or not,
Right.
could contribute to the very power vacuum we've been discussing.
So we're not just dealing with the actions of one individual or one administration,
Right.
but rather a confluence of factors
Exactly.
that are reshaping the global landscape.
Exactly. And that's why it's so important to understand the connections,
Okay.
the ripple effects,
Uh-huh.
and the potential long-term consequences of decisions being made today.
Right.
We're living in a complex and interconnected world
Yeah.
where actions taken in one corner of the globe can have profound implications
Right.
for people thousands of miles away.
This deep dive has certainly highlighted that interconnectedness.
It's
We've gone from Musk's role in the U.S. government
Uh-huh.
to the potential unraveling of U.S.-backed democratic efforts abroad.
It's a lot to take in.
It is.
But it underscores the importance of staying informed and engaged.
Right.
We can't afford to be passive observers
Uh-huh.
in a world where the stakes are this high.
So what should our listeners be watching for in the coming months and years? What are the key indicators that will tell us which direction things are heading?
Keep an eye on the legal challenges to Musk's influence,
Okay.
the actions of Congress in response to the foreign aid freeze,
Uh-huh.
and the global reaction to these shifts in U.S. policy.
And how those shifts impact the work of organizations like USAID and the National Endowment for Democracy?
Precisely. Pay attention to the stories coming out of countries and regions
Okay.
that rely heavily on U.S. support.
Okay.
Are democratic institutions being weakened?
Right.
Is there a rise in authoritarianism?
Uh-huh.
Are human rights being violated?
Right.
These are the warning signs we need to be vigilant about.
This has been an incredibly informative deep dive.
Good.
I feel like I have a much better understanding
Yeah.
of the complexities involved.
I'm glad to hear that.
Yeah.
But it's important to remember that these are ongoing developments,
Uh-huh.
and the situation is constantly evolving. The more we understand,
Right.
the better equipped we are
Yeah.
to engage in informed discussions and advocate for the values we believe in.
We'll be sure to keep our listeners updated as the story unfolds.
I think that's essential.
Yeah.
Knowledge is power.
Uh-huh.
And in times like these, we need to empower ourselves
Right.
with information and understanding.
Well said. We've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
It's time to wrap up this deep dive.
Okay.
We're back with the deep dive. And I got to say, this conversation has been eye-opening.
It has.
We've been unpacking Elon Musk's influence, government restructuring,
Right.
and the potential ripple effects of these changes on a global scale.
Yeah.
It's a lot to process.
Yeah.
So for our listeners who might be feeling overwhelmed,
Sure.
what are the key takeaways they should be mulling over?
I think one of the biggest takeaways here is that the world is changing and fast.
Yeah?
The lines between tech, politics, and global affairs are increasingly blurred.
Okay.
And we see this with Musk's involvement in the U.S. government,
Right.
and we're seeing it with the impact of U.S. policy decisions on the international stage.
And it seems like this blurring of lines is creating both opportunities and risks.
Absolutely. On the one hand, you have someone like Elon Musk,
Right.
who is known for innovation and a willingness to challenge the status quo.
Uh-huh.
His involvement in government could potentially lead to positive changes,
Right.
increased efficiency and a more streamlined bureaucracy.
But on the other hand, there are serious concerns about transparency and accountability.
Exactly.
Yeah.
When someone with vast private business interests
Right.
is also deeply involved in shaping government policy,
Mm-hmm.
it raises questions about whose interests are being served.
Right.
And when you couple that
Yeah.
with a reduction in oversight,
Right.
like the removal of inspectors general,
Uh-huh.
it creates an environment where potential misconduct
Okay.
could go unchecked.
We also can't ignore the global implications.
Right.
The U.S. has historically played a significant role in promoting democracy and human rights around the world.
Yeah.
If the U.S. retreats from that role, it could have a destabilizing effect,
Yeah.
creating opportunities for authoritarian regimes to expand their influence.
It's like a delicate ecosystem.
Uh-huh.
When one element shifts, it impacts the entire system.
Okay.
The U.S. pulling back from its global commitments could embolden authoritarian leaders,
Okay.
weaken democratic institutions, and ultimately lead to a less stable and less free world.
So what can our listeners do?
Okay.
Is there any way to counter these potentially negative trends?
Well, first and foremost, stay informed.
Right.
Pay attention to what's happening both domestically and internationally.
Okay.
Read news from a variety of sources, engage in thoughtful discussions,
Uh-huh.
and challenge your own assumptions.
Beyond staying informed, what actions can people take?
Support organizations that are fighting for democracy and human rights.
Okay.
Contact your elected representatives and make your voice heard
Okay.
on issues that matter to you.
Uh-huh.
Get involved in your community and work to promote positive change at the local level.
It sounds like a combination of individual action and elective effort is needed
Uh-huh.
to navigate these complex challenges.
I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah.
It's easy to feel powerless in the face of global events,
Right.
but every action, no matter how small, can contribute to a larger movement for positive change.
This deep dive has been a fantastic exploration of a really complex topic.
It has.
I want to thank you for sharing your insights and for helping us untangle this web of interconnected issues.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah.
I think these conversations are essential.
Right.
And I hope our listeners will continue to engage with these topics and seek out information from a variety of sources.
Yeah.
The more informed we are, the better equipped we are to make a positive impact on the world.
And on that note, we'll wrap up this episode of The Deep Dive.
Sounds good.
Thanks for joining us. And as always, keep questioning, keep learning, and keep the conversation going.